be very focused in the discussion. You know how when you watch like an American detective story, and the cop is white, and then he goes after this, he goes into the underbelly of American society and goes after these black or African American characters. And then the mafia chief or the bad guy turns out to be white, because you have to kind of balance it. There has to be good guys of this, good and bad guys of each group. So I'm going to ask them, since we're talking about censorship, of course there's always political self-censorship and maybe self-censorship when it comes to writing about sex. But how about ethnographic self-censorship? Do you feel that you have to balance your characters? We'll start with Ghulam.
Thank you. I think they all understand the complexities in Malaysia in terms of the racial compositions and so on and so forth. I think that's one level of it. And to me, the most serious level is that we don't even understand each other. Like, we don't even understand each other. So I told people, like, we have a Chinese writer, for example, generally he has Chinese characters in drama. I wrote a drama about in short stories and so on and so forth. And the Malaysians have just Malay characters and the Indian likewise. So they don't really cross over. They're beginning to now. The younger generation writers are beginning to, so that we can understand each other better. But at one time, we felt that was a barrier. Language was a barrier because we could not communicate in English, which is not a common language. And we could not even speak proper Malay, they were not Malays. And so it was only like a monolingual in a sense. Plus some Asa Malay, which is speak in the market. So this one level of censorship. And I found the second level was, of course, governmental control. In drama especially, every play is staged has to go through a process of licensing. Apply for permit. And I had that my problem with my first play, not really play. That was about stop it and say no, we can't. Because it touches negative issues. The play touches the first play, in fact, it touches negative issues. So you can't touch political issues, racial issues, and so on and so forth. So I think things have got better for a while, getting worse again now, recently. So we are actually looking at two things here. One is self-censorship, or the inability to communicate across cultures, because you don't understand the culture well enough to write about it, not in the language. Secondly, the political implications of censorship, and this also follows through with the problems with this publishing and the problems with the trying to stage drama. And this also are controlled. These are the two important points.
I mean, the question of censorship is a very interesting one when writing in places like Malaysia or Asia more generally. My books are overtly political in the sense that what I'm trying to do is write a very traditional whodunit, old-fashioned, somebody gets killed, 5 or 6 potential murderers with different motives, one sweaty cop on the side. But my whole point is that every motive will be an attempt to air a political or cultural or legal issue that I care about. So, as an example, in Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder, a Chinese timber tycoon is shot at point-blank range. Everybody in my books are killed in a very straightforward fashion. That's because I'm terrified that somebody will write to me and say nobody will die in those circumstances. So, I mean, for a number of books, people were shot at point-blank range, and then somebody said to me, you've got to find another way of killing them. And I was like, okay, somebody was bludgeoned to death with a hard instrument. And then I thought, but how do we know he died? I mean, bludgeoned, no. So I said bludgeoned repeatedly, which I'm always convinced will lead inevitably to death, even if you're using a toothbrush. I mean, it's a question of motivation, right? Back to censorship. Yeah, so Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder, it's a timber tycoon who shot at point-blank range, but the person who was first arrested for the murder, who we expect to see hasn't really done it, is his wife, or his ex-wife. They're in a custody battle for the 3 children of the marriage. She's Chinese as well. He converts to Islam in order to get custody of the children, because obviously Malaysia has a complex Sharia civil law dichotomy. So it's an attempt to bring out an interesting facet of civil society using a crime fiction motive. Likewise, one of the other possible murderers is a man who works with the Penan in Borneo. and his wife, who is one of the natives, is murdered by timber people who are related to this man's company, and so maybe he came over and bumped him off. But what I'm trying to show you is that I'm always trying to add political issues. So in that sense, they're very overtly political. I mean, do I exercise self-censorship, or do I take care to balance out the races? Malaysia is a fascinating country, and I was listening to you talk about an alternative vision of a utopian Malaysia where we all adopt a single religion and don't have divisions that make us who we are. And for a moment, I felt sad. I felt sad because actually what I find most fascinating but also scary about our society is our divisions and our conflict and our lack of ability to agree on anything. And so on the one hand, I want us all to live together as a beautiful, happy people. On the other hand, I think, oh God, that might be boring, and would we lose our quality of food? Who knows? But so I don't think that I actively self-censor, but I also don't try and portray an entirely negative view of whether it be Malaysia or any of the countries I write about, because there's so much good in us as well. So what I'm trying to do is capture the fact that we're conflicted rather than just good or bad or confused and do I be careful to balance the races? Essentially, I make sure that lots of people of different races die. That's the best I can do for racial relations in this country. I tend to be less worried about race than about sex, because in crime fiction, I'm sure many of you are familiar that a lot of current crime fiction writing is extremely violent, unnecessarily violent, graphically violent, pornographically violent. And it's always towards women, sometimes it's towards children. And I'm like, enough already. So I only kill men. But yeah, I am a little bit trying to fight back in my own small way.
Okay. I'm going to tackle the easy question first. Do I make an effort to balance the races? No, absolutely not, because I think that would make for loathsome fiction. I think it would make for terrible writing. If you consciously try to, the idea that if you're writing, this is in quotes, if you're writing on behalf of a developing country, if you come from a developing country, if you're from an ethnic minority, that you're somehow supposed to represent your people. It's the idea transported to, say, the United Kingdom or America would be ridiculous. We don't ask Ian McEwan why he's writing about, Jews in London. So when my book came out, there were some reviews that said, well, this book is supposed to be about Malaysia, but why doesn't it, why doesn't it talk about Malay family, or why is there no Chinese family? And it's just, transport that question to a novel from the UK and you would see how ridiculous it is. I don't try to represent all the races. In terms of self-censorship, and we had a brief conversation before this session, I think I very consciously try not to self-censor, but that in itself becomes, then you run the risk of always trying to be provocative when you don't actually have to be, when you have no reason to be. You could just be telling a story for the pleasure of the story, and then you think, well, maybe I should be saying something more dangerous here so that people get pissed off. Well, so it's a fine balance, especially in a place like Malaysia, but especially working on the second novel, which is so, which deals with religious issues very overtly. It's very much about religion. I think I do have to think about it, because there's certain things that people do get in trouble for writing about. At the same time, I think I take a lot of comfort from the fact that the censorship authorities in Malaysia don't really care about fiction, and there are all kinds of things that have been sold as fiction, in form of fiction. You can walk into a bookshop in Malaysia and find, novels about gay people or novels about really anything, whereas if it will be, I think if the same subject matter would be sold as a film or as non-fiction, it would definitely be banned. So I take a lot of comfort in the fact that, that fiction isn't taken as seriously. There's a bright side and a dark side to that, but for me, for my purposes, I do actually feel that I can write whatever I want. And maybe, that's another thing that we discussed before. Maybe I'm slightly protected by the fact that I don't live in Malaysia. I don't know. I can't answer that. You could never actually know who you would have been if you'd gone down a different path. Would I be writing exactly the same things if I were living in Malaysia? I don't know, but it's an interesting question to consider.
Actually, I discovered something when we were at the Gone Literary Festival a few years ago, that most Malaysian authors, Peter, me, Tash, Twaning, got a white partner. And I wondered whether that actually gave us the freedom to write nasty things about our home country. And then I realized it wasn't that at all. It's only white partners who will let you actually write for a living rather than going off and doing something worthwhile that makes money. There's no good Indian man who then let me waste the last 10 years writing fiction. So no, I don't think it's a freedom issue in that sense.
I think that's why you enjoy killing off Malaysian men.
All men are not so limited.
I guess we are.
Why do you say that?
Okay, anyway, one of the reasons why I asked that question was, early on, some of you may have attended this really excellent session with Lat, and users rather asking the question that they wanted to ask for 30 years, which is like, who's this girl, who is Norma? By the way, my daughter's name happens to be Norma, but was she somebody really special to Lat? And then he said, oh, no, it could have been, there's a Norma in every town. It could have been Yoke, it could have been Rani. So he already got, 3 out of 3. So that's, it's like kind of instinctive that,
But don't you remember our textbooks? They always had Ali, Ramasamy, and what was the Chinese boy called? Ajong, yes. So we're very politically correct in terms of our official, textbooks and stuff.
On that issue, I wanted to say, you always find the races, races, for example, India, China, Mali. And I said, what about me? I'm not China, India, Mali, Malaysia. So I said, my life. I'm under the first category is others. So actually, without documenting others, I'm my life. And then the last category is, what do you mean? I said, not India, China, Mali, so am I, I'm my life. So we have that category, which is neglected actually our writings. We don't write about those people. I think I'm the first one to try to write about Punjabi characters, for example. Indian Muslim Mama characters for in my fiction. For the first time ever. So there's no other range of communities, not really here, Sabah, Sarawak. Look at them, how many others communities we have. They all get sort of flattened into 3 categories. Even in the formal language. So I think that's the whole bunch of people that are going to appear. I think not actually study and use the characters or about enough. But it's all stereotyping.
Actually, I'm curious about what Peter was saying earlier about the fact that when you write as a Malaysian or from any third world country, you're seen as representing the country in your writing, and therefore every time you write anything negative, you're letting your people down and your culture down. And I remember when Most Superior Malaysian Murder first came out, on my Facebook page, I had a sudden random remark, why you fight like that? Now nobody's going to come and visit Malaysia as a tourist. I was like, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't know I had responsibility for the tourism trade.
Because no one gets murdered in other countries.
Yeah, but I do feel a responsibility. I do feel a little bit guilty when I portray a third world country negatively. Almost it's like they already have so much rubbish going on. They're poor, uneducated, bad traffic, bad weather, bad infrastructure, storms. And then I write a nasty book. As readers, do you feel that we have to protect our sort of country in terms of the way it's portrayed, or do you not mind when we write it? Should not be. But when I write other people's books, I'm like, yeah, I write like that. So I understand that knee-jerk reaction then, and I'm wondering whether we do have a certain responsibility as the first few writers writing for an international audience.
Can I answer?
I'm asking you.
That's not to finish an answer, but my thoughts on that question actually, I think we do have a responsibility, but I think it's our responsibility to speak out about things that are not working in Malaysia, because they get very little attention in the international media. Malaysia basically has a watered-down version of apartheid, and half of the world doesn't know anything about it. And I think the only thing that could possibly change this in Malaysia, increasingly, I'm beginning to think that the only thing that will ever change it is international pressure. And if no one says anything about it, it's never going to happen. So I actually think that it is my responsibility, and just like any good parent, I think I'm doing this for your own good.
I disagree. I don't think that change in Malaysia will come from outside pressure. When I look at the Malaysian society, when I look at the general election 2013, I see how much change is coming from within. But because we get defensive and protective, the minute somebody outside criticizes us, I actually think it's counterproductive. It's better that we have a groundswell of anger from within our community rather than, have Obama say something. reality now. It's also okay to occasionally criticize by the party, like police.
I think those things are both true. I mean, yes, I do think that things are changing in Malaysia, but it's really, really slow. And I think that, you know, if you read the New York Times or the Guardian, if you look at their coverage in Malaysia, I mean, really, the reality of the situation in Malaysia, and I can't blame, I mean, there's so many terrible things going on in the world, you can't possibly cover them all on the front page of the Guardian every week, but I think that it gets so little attention. So, I mean, I think whether or not, we can argue about where the real change is going to come from, or at what rate and what pace, but I think that there does need to be some international awareness. I think it can't hurt anyway.
So you realize why I put these two at either end? they actually, you know each other for a long time. So, as Dr. Ghulam was saying, how about the others? Because there are not just Malay Chinese Indians, but there are others. And probably fiction is where you have the opportunity to actually bring out the complexity of not just different people, but also the relationship between different people. So, I think Dr. Ghulam has some of this in his poetry.
Poetry, drama, social, explore all these others, especially well, I mean, my whole family is from Pakistan, Punjab, my father was from there, and living in India, I sort of interact much more with the Indian Muslims. So I think my own experience, familiarity with the community and the culture, so it gave me the confidence to do that. So I've got the Jali characters, as we do, safe, got the Mama characters, and so on and so forth. Because I also feel like to make characters because of my own research. I spent half a lifetime in research on agriculture. So my character is also strong. I'm coming to the point that we can't cover all the spectrum. And I feel very unsafe with Chinese characters or like that. I don't know that at all, right? I'm sure it's the case of other people as well. But I think on the whole, when we talk about Malaysian literature, we have to ignore this whole spectrum of the groups. I think we need to be, brought to some kind of attention. The writings, the fiction, and so on and so forth. Poetry, yes, I read the poems that were actually based on the Mama community in so on. But I'm talking more broader terms than just individual pieces of work. So.
I think we can open up the questions. Go ahead.
Just listening to Shamini and well, we're talking about Indian and Chinese. I'm going to try and just speak loud.
Shout, yeah.
We're talking about Indian. Okay, and you categorize yourself as lying. Whereas you are really from the Indian subcontinent, which to me has been a real problem. Because in this country, when we say Indian, and every year, and our IC say we are Indian, I should guess, looking as Caucasian as they please, is categorized as Indian. I have friends who are Chinese looking and are categorized as Indian. So I think we need to make a distinct difference between ethnicity for our country, ethnicity, as opposed to race. Race, as we categorize it, is really nationality. A person is never categorized as Hokkien or Kek or Cantonese or anything. He's called Chinese, which means he belongs to China. And I'm fourth generation so-called Indian, but really of Tamil ethnicity, partly from the old Ceylon, which is called Sri Lanka, and part from South India. Again, the heritage, tracks don't begin on the rubber plantation, but elsewhere. I think to begin with, if we're talking about India, even in our writing, we should migrate to Tamil or Punjabi or Gujarati. And if we're talking about Chinese, we should then, So that's, thank you.
Could you just introduce yourself, tell us your name, and then have a question for the politica?
My question was, why do you carry on dividing ethnicity in terms of Indian, Chinese, and Malay? Those are nationalities. They're not ethnic.
So maybe it's a rhetorical question. Okay, this session we're not going to really go into ethnic politics, but about how rights write about it, right?
As a point of the session.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
I think it's an excellent question. But
No, I'm just wondering, because this has stemmed from the old British way of classifying people. And in Malaysia, when they say Indian, they assume they're all Tamils. Right? At every level, when they say Indian, they mean Tamil. They're not even Tamil Muslim, they're talking about Tamil Muslim gang. Nobody else, you see. So I tell them, no, you're not Tamil Muslim gang, I don't speak Tamil, I can speak Tamil or not. It's my mother tongue, it's mother tongue, and so on and so forth. And I'm not even Hindu, so why classify me the same as MIC peoples? That's a problem. The problem is that they don't see the distinction here. Because of the British, they oversimplify the thing. And the reverse of it now, every other Indonesian is called Malay, for political reasons, even though the Indonesians don't want that. Right? So this is an issue. So when we're dealing with characters like the Mama, the Punjabis, and so on and so forth, we don't treat them like Tamils. They cannot do that. Because they're different culturally, language, and this and that. So it's a bit different in Chinese because there's not much of a difference between the Chinese Hokkien and everything. Language is the same, and it doesn't become so obvious. But among the Indians, so I asked somebody when they said Bengali, you mean Bengali 6. So I said, it's Bengali 6, 7, 8, 9. What about the others? Why did you say 6? Right? And they look at me and say, what's Bengali 7? I say, me. Okay.
I think just to go back to your comment or question, I think you're absolutely right that ethnicity is something, even if it's socially constructed, it's real, it's lived experience, and that Indian and Chinese and Malay describe nationality, which is exactly why we shouldn't be. Our nationality, we're Malaysian, we're not Indian, we're not Chinese, we're not Malay. By nationality, we are all Malaysian. I think your comment gets to the heart of why, the categories, it's such a vexed question in Malaysia. Who is Malay, who is Chinese, who is Indian, and the fact is none of us. By this point, that there's so much intermarriage, even within the Malay community, who is Malay and who isn't. It has to, in order to be able to define, the government at least has to tie itself in knots, trying to decide who is who can tick which box. And the fact is that it's because we've substituted nationality for ethnicity, as you say.
Although I think the plan to make British is probably our best bet. How to get out of this mess. It's interesting because I'm Sri Lankan Tamil. My passport says Indian, but my brother is Danline. My children are half white, so when I was trying to discuss with the Malaysian embassy in Singapore, I questioned they said they're Caucasian. I said no, they're half Indian. He was like, okay, I'll put Indian. I said no, but actually Sri Lankan half. He was like, what do you want me to put? It just shows the absurdity, right? He didn't know, I didn't know, neither of us really cared. But I find that fascinating in itself. I'm saddened that it's become complicated because I was just going to kill a Eurasian man in my next book and solve all Eurasian issues, but it's not going to be that simple, is it?
So, yes, I didn't mean to dismiss the question, but it is a question that takes 3 days of dialogue at least. So I would like to kind of keep it to how do these characters who are from different cultural backgrounds or nationalities, then how do they communicate in English and what gets lost in translation? And it's really how do writers deal with it, and that's why this session is called Lost in Malaysia.
Well, you mentioned something about English or English earlier on. English is artificial. It's not really a language. It's very, very low key kind of usage at the moment. And I do not think it's going to work for the whole piece of work. All of us try bits and pieces here. One character, 2 characters, and so on. We tried that in certain scenes. I tried in the Indian scene in my play, Rock Road, and the Indian baby and the Chinese baby tried to communicate in English. It's very convenient, but I think it would be difficult to go to a level of writing a whole novel or a whole play that way. It's very difficult to do it. It may come in time. Because we don't have that as a language. We don't have that as a language. When we speak in a good language, we speak proper English. Go home, we speak proper Punjabi, proper Tamil, proper everything. nothing else. And so it's only in certain places in social interaction that this kind of language. And I don't think it can go very far. I think Singapore not here. Singapore, it's English. It's not gone very far in literature.
No, I actually think the tragedy is that we might be losing our Malaysian English. I mean, I find it sometimes really difficult to capture the nuances of how we speak to each other in writing. Because again, we read properly and we sort of converse properly in this sort of form, but it's not how we were speaking when we were having a cup of tea earlier. So to sort of translate the way we speak to each other into writing can be quite difficult. I usually just go home and listen to my mother. Because I mean, she lives in Bangsa, so of course they start off a conversation with how wonderful it is to live in Malaysia, and etc. So then they'll be, but crime is very bad. Then they'll be, but in Bangsa, crime is very, very bad. Then they'll be, I know this woman, she got robbed on the street last week. And then, the final blame, the victim thing. My mother said last week, but it's because the way she carries her handbag, she just swing and walk. And I was like, swing and walk. This is why I listened to you, woman, because I could not have remembered how to express myself so beautifully. So we must remember to keep our language, because how else can you just go around from crying in Malaysia to swing and walk? Unless you are a true blue Malaysian. And I worry sometimes on using that voice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think maybe it depends on your social circle or what circles you live in. But I actually consider language to be our national language in a way. It's the language that really unites Malaysians. In a way, I mean, yes, we have Bahasa Malaysia, but it's again, that's a very vexed. I know I always use that word, but it's a very complicated question in Malaysia. The question, because it belongs to one of the communities. I think it's never been felt like, okay, this language belongs equally to all of us. And that's, we can debate why that is, and we can talk about how to solve that problem. But in the meantime, English has become our national language. And I think, I would beg to differ actually, that it's not possible. I mean, of course, remains to be seen who speak my knowledge. Well, but I would beg to differ that it's not possible to write literary fiction in a vernacular. I think it is. I mean, there has been some really wonderful fiction out of the Caribbean and out of Africa that has been written entirely in the vernacular. There's a wonderful novel called, I'm going to blank out the name, the Palm Wine Drinker, I think, the Palm Wine Drunkard, what is it? Drunkard, Palm Wine Drunkard, yes. And that's just one example, but I think that there has been historically, and I'm certainly not the first person to try this, there's been a long tradition of trying to sort of capture the reality of a culture by actually writing like people speak. And I think there are many things about Malaysia, about Malaysians, about the way that Malaysians think, that can't be communicated in standard English. Because in English, actually, there are all sorts of nuances, there are all sorts of obsessions, and all sorts of fears that we only express in language that really can't be translated into standard English. And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. Obviously, I wouldn't be trying to do it. Okay. Q&A, yes. Jay, yeah.
Can I make a contrary point that what language does?
For the back, maybe, yeah?
Okay, very much. I make a contrary point that language is actually the lowest common denominator between different classes of people, different cultures, different races. It actually stymies and stultifies intellectual thought and creativity. And what you might be trying to do is, because you speak beautifully and perfectly, is to then reinvent for yourself a version of language. And what is absolutely essential is that you are fluent and conversant with a clear way of communicating, whether it's Punjabi or English or in Tweed or whatever it is. You need to be able to articulate yourself very clearly, whichever language you choose to write in, and then you can experiment with the kind of language that you do. But the unfortunate thing I find with the way in which we converse, in a vernacular sense, is that we don't have the range of vocabulary that can encapsulate the complexities of 21st century life. That's it.
Nola? That's my way of disagreeing.
Do we have any questions from the back?
I just thought maybe I should give one of you a chance to respond. I don't know.
I ain't got no mic.
I mean, yes, essentially, I agree. I think earlier when I talked about, when I was first talking about my work, I said that what I am trying to do is to invent, it's an invented language, obviously. Yes, I do think, I mean, someone who speaks only in English, I'm not going to rule it out, but I'm going to say probably won't be able to express the full range of human experience and emotion in literary form. So yes, I'm trying to sort of, and I think that's true of the palm wine brand or any of these beautiful novels that have come out of the Caribbean or Africa or any of these other places. Any of these novels written in the vernacular were written by highly educated people who then thought, let me try to find a way to incorporate the voice, the actual voice of this country in writing. And I think, yes, I mean, it involves, first of all, being able to articulate yourself in the language that you're writing, but also, as Shamini alluded to in her comment, it involves, this is the part that we're not getting to when we say that it's not possible to write in language, is that it actually involves having an ear, a good ear. You know, you took that comment seriously and walked up, and you took that stuck in your mind because you have an ear for language, and I think that's the part that I want to sort of honor. I don't want to dismiss that. I mean, we have to be able to actually hear what Malaysians speak like, and we have to respect that, or not, or celebrate it even, not just respect it.
I think the only thing I would take issue with is the question of whether lowest common denominator is necessarily a bad thing. Because you kind of have to start somewhere, don't you? I was watching Lee Chong-wei being interviewed on ESPN the other day, and he was speaking this beautiful combination of English and Malay. It was impossible to discern which language he was speaking, and they had English translations across the bottom. And I was like, you need to have Malay translations as well, because you cannot just pretend that he's speaking one language. And so I don't object if we start as a community with the lowest common denominator, you know, even if it is just a hodgepodge of language and food. Yes?
Hello, yes, my name is Susan, and I'm very interested in this conversation. The thing that I have experienced is that I have learned to be very, very clear, very simple in my English expression, so that I can have a conversation with my fellow Malaysians. And that's helped me to understand my language better. But the only other problem I have is sometimes it is so simple, I'm not sure if there's enough subtlety, and I worry about that. So that's my comment as an outsider wanting to communicate in English. But I love, what do you call it, language. I love it. Very concise, very simple.
Would you like to also just say who you are and then ask a question?
My name is Susan.
Sorry, you did, yes.
Yes, right. And really, I was making a comment about this next question about the vernacular, speaking in English vernacular.
Thank you.
It's interesting though, because I think in Western culture, the opposite happens. You use a lot of words and you never say what you mean. So, you know, I mean, I listen to my husband and his mother talk to each other, and they can spend enormous amounts of time discussing a book that they've read, and they can't get to the point about the fact that he's really pissed off that he didn't, you know, come home from work early yesterday because he come all the way from England and he couldn't be asked. You know, so sometimes you can lose yourself in words. I mean, my English husband in Singapore used to call up directory inquiries, and he couldn't get an answer because he would pick them up, and you basically got to shout, "Changi Airport!" And then he would say, "Excuse me, I hope you don't mind, I'm terribly sorry, but if you could," and then slam the phone down on him. So it's not necessarily a question of language as culture.
You know, I'm Lubna of Indo-Pakistan origin, and when I first came here and my children were growing up, every second word was la this and la that, and it just drive me up the wall. I said, please, in the house you speak proper English, and you're not going to use the word la. The minute they go out of the house, they start to speak, you know, with their friends and all the same. Because we try to be clear and we bring up the children so
that they can speak properly. But that is just remains in the house. The minute we go outside, it's the same thing. It's Bangladesh. It's okay, but when you're speaking to other people outside of Malaysia, they don't understand what you say.
That's why I made this now. Firstly, you have to control. Secondly, even if you talk about language outside the social context and so on, the Malaysian condition or the situation, there's hardly 1%, 2% who will speak that. Because the Malays only use English. Okay, the Malays don't use English. They use proper Malay and bad English all the time. Or hardly any English. Right? There's the others, Chinese and Indian, who use kind of English. Good educated Malays don't use English. Very seldom you have that. So it's the others, it's again the lower ground of the society that uses that. Not educated. So they're looking at a very, very small percentage of people actually using it.
That's true. I mean, I don't know that there are other nations in the audience, but other nations up here on stage will be right. I think that Malays do use language. At least the Malays I know, we know very different people. What do you mean by Western educated ones? You mean educated in London schools in Malaysia? Well, yes, I mean, you have to have some English to use language. It's Malaysia version of language. But I think when I was growing up in Ipoh, in school, yes, I mean, my friends were Malay, Chinese, Indian, other Eurasian, whatever, and we communicated in English, I would say, including the Malays. So
I think it's a generational difference. Okay, one last question? Yeah, last question.
I'm Faye On. I'm wondering if I'm Faye On.
I'm the president here. I'm wondering if any of you have had your works translated and published in Mandarin or in Tamil.
It's tragic. You know, I've been translating into all sorts of weird languages. I mean, Serbian, Czech, and Polish. Never yet into Malay, Tamil, or Chinese. It is a bit tragic, isn't it? Any translations out there?
No translations. We want to do poems in Malay. The rest all in English. No translations yet. But I did my own translation for play. My first play from English to Malay. Publishing. With the help of another writer.
I think my answer is exactly the same as Chinese. So.
We're going to bring the session to a close shortly, so I'll just give this a chance to, any last remarks that you'd like to throw in.
No, seriously, you've been a great audience and we really appreciate everything. I find it ironic that this session was called Lost in Malaysia because I think it's fairly clear that we're all found in Malaysia. I mean, our roots are so firmly here in all our writing and in our expression and in everything we do. We can run, but we can't escape.
Thank you. I think I covered most of the issues, but because we're trying to go to that for the time, I think it was a good discussion.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. It's really wonderful to see a full room here. I'm going to be really annoying though and not stop. Thank you, because I really find it very difficult to let things go. But I just want to respond to your comment earlier about proper English. It's sort of, this is a matter for discussion after. I hope that you all will talk about this on your own later. But I actually disagree fundamentally with this distinction between proper English and other English, because I think that language is a living thing, and that there is no, I mean, who decides what's proper English and what isn't? I think
it's how we communicate with each other, and I think that's what the ties that bind, that's what binds us, because we still communicate even if we don't do it properly. So thanks for being here, and let's give a last round of applause for all.